The complete work of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 2, Section 1, Chapter 2, The Powers of the Mind. Lecture delivered at Los Angeles, California, January 8, 1900. All over the world, has been a belief in throughout supernatural thoughts throughout the ages. All of us have heard of extraordinary happenings, and many of us have had some personal experience of them. I would rather introduce the subject by telling you certain facts which have come within my own experience. I once heard of a man who, who, if anyone went to him with question in his mind, would answer them immediately. And I was also informed that he foretold events. I was curious and went to see him with few friends. We each we each had something in our mind to ask, and to avoid mistakes, we wrote down our questions and put them in our pockets. As soon as the man saw one of us, he repeated our questions and gave the answers to them. Then he wrote something on paper, which he folded up, asked me to sign on the back, and said, "Don't look at it, put it in your pocket and keep it till I ask for it again." And so on to each one of us. He next told us about some event that would happen to us in the future. Then he said, "Now think of a word or a sentence from any language you like." I thought a long sentence from Sanskrit, and a language of which he was entirely ignorant. "Now take out the paper from your pocket," he said. The Sanskrit sentence was written there. He had written it an hour before with the remark, "In confirmation of what I have written, this man will think of this sentence." It was correct. Another of us, who had been given a similar paper which he had signed and placed in his pocket, was also asked to think of the sentence. He thought a sentence in Arabic, which it was still less possible for the man to know. It was some passage from the Quran, and my friend found this written down on the paper. Another of us was a physician. He thought of sentence from the German medical book. It was written on his paper. Several days later, I went to this man again, thinking possibly I had been deluded somehow before. I took other friends, and on this occasion also he came out wonderfully triumphant. Another time, I was in the city of Hyderabad in India, and I was told of a Brahmin there who could produce number of things from where nothing nobody knew. This man was in business there. He was a respectable gentleman, and I asked him to show me his trick. It so happened that this man had a fever, and in India there is a general belief that if a holy man puts his hand on a sick man, he would be well. This Brahmin came to me and said, "Sir, put your hand on my head so that my fever may be cured." I said, "Very good, but you show me your trick." He promised. I put my hand on his head as desired, and later he came to fulfill his promise. He had only a strip of cloth about his loins. He looked off everything else. He took off everything else from him. I had a blanket which I gave him to wrap around himself because it was cold, and made him sit in the corner. 25 pairs of eyes were looking at him, and he has said, "Now look, write down anything you want." We all wrote down the names of fruits that never grew in our country, bunches of grapes, oranges, and so on. And we gave him those bit of papers that, and there came from under his blanket, bushes of grapes, oranges, and so forth. So much that if all that fruit was waved, it would have been twice as weight or heavy as the man. He asked us to eat the fruit. Some of us objected, thinking it was hypnotism, but the man began eating himself, so we ate. It was all right. He ended by proceeding a mass of roses. Each flower was perfect, with a dewdrop on the petals, not one crushed, not one injured, and the masses of them. When I asked the man for an explanation, he said, "It is all sleight of hands. Whatever it was, it seemed to be impossible that it could be sleight of hand merely. From whence could he have got such large quantities of things? Well, I saw many things like that. Going about India, you find hundreds of similar things in different places. These are in every country. Even in this country, you will find some such wonderful things. Of course, there is a great deal of fraud, no doubt, but then, whenever you see fraud, you have also to say that fraud is an imitation. There must be some truth somewhere that is being imitated. You cannot imitate nothing. Imitation must be of something substantially true. In very remote times in India, thousands of years ago, this fact used to happen even more than they do today. It seems to me that when the country becomes very thickly populated, psychic powers deteriorates. Psychic power deteriorates. Given a vast country, tiny inhabited, there will perhaps be more of psychical power there. These facts, the Hindus, being analytically minded, took up and investigated, and they came to certain remarkable conclusions. That is, they made a science of it. They found out that all these, though extraordinary, are also natural. There is nothing supernatural. They are under laws just the same as any other physical phenomena. It is not a freak of nature that a man is born with such powers. They can be systematically studied, practiced, and acquired. This science they call the science of Raja Yoga. There are thousands of people who cultivate the study of this science, and for the whole nation, it has become a part of daily worship. The conclusion they have reached is that all these extraordinary powers are in the mind of man. This mind is a part of universal mind. Each mind is connected with every other mind. Each mind, wherever it is located, is in actual communication with the whole world. Have you ever noticed the phenomena that is called thought transference? A man here is thinking something, and that thought is manifested in somebody else, in some other place. With preparations, not by chance, a man want to send a thought to another mind at a distance, and this other mind knows that the thought is coming, and he receives it exactly as it is sent out. Distance makes no difference. The thought goes and reaches the other man, and he understands it. If your mind were an isolated something here, and my mind were an isolated something there, and there were no connection between the two, how would it be possible for my thought to reach you? In the ordinary cases, it is not my thought that is reaching you direct, but my thought has got to be dissolved into ethereal vibrations, and those ethereal vibrations go into your brain, and they have to be resolved again into your own thoughts. Here is a dissolution of thought, and there is a resolution of thought. Here is a dissolution of thought, and there is a resolution of thought. It is roundabout process, but In telepathy, there is no such thing, it is direct. This shows that there is a community of mind, as the yogis call it. The mind is universal. Your mind, my mind, and all these little minds are fragments of that universal mind, the little wave in the ocean. And on account of this community, we can convey our thoughts directly to one another. You see what is happening all around us. The world is one of the influence. Part of our energy is used up in the preservation of our own bodies. Beyond that, every particle of our energy is day and night being used in influencing others. Our bodies, our virtues, our intellect, and our spirituality. All these are continuously influencing others. And so, conversely, we are being influenced by them. This is going on all around us. Now, to take a concrete example, a man comes, he is very learned. His language is beautiful and he speaks to you by hours, but he does not make any impression. Any other man comes and he speaks for few words, not well arranged, not well arranged, ungrammatical, perhaps all the same, he makes an immense impression. Many of you have seen that, so it is evident that words alone cannot always produce an impression. Words, even thoughts, contribute only one third of the influence in making an impression. The man, two third. What you call the personal magnetism of a man, that is what goes out and impresses you. In our families, there are the heads. Some of them are successful, others are not. Why? We complain of others in our failures. The moment I am successful, I say so and so is a cause of the failure. In failure, one does not like to confess one's own fault and weakness. Each person tries to hold himself faultless and lays the blame upon somebody or someone else, or even on the bad luck. When the head of the families fail, they should ask themselves why it is that some person manage a family so well and the others do not. Then you will find that the difference in owing to man, his presence, his personality. Coming to great leaders of mankind, we always find that it was the personality of the man that counted. Now take all the great authors of the past and the great thinkers. Really speaking, how many thoughts have they thought? Take all the writings that have been left to us by the past leaders of mankind. Take each one of their books and appraise them. The real thoughts, new and genuine, that have been thought in this world up to this time amount to only a handful. Read in their books the thoughts they have left to us. The authors do not appear to be giant to us, and yet we know that they were great giants in their days. What made them so? Not simply the thoughts they thought, neither the books they wrote, nor the speeches they made. It was something else that is now gone. That is their personality. As I have already remarked, the personality of the man is two-thirds, and his intellect, his words are but one-third. It is the real man, the personality of the man, that runs through us. Our actions are but effects. Actions must come when the man is there, and the effect is bound to follow the cause. The idea of all education, all training should be this man making. But instead of that, we are always trying to polish up the outside. What use is polishing up of the outside when there is no inside? The end and the aim of all training is to make the man grow. The man who influences, who throws his magic, as it were, upon his fellow beings, is a dynamo of power. And when that man is ready, do not, he can do anything and everything he likes. That personality put upon anything will make it work. Now we see that though this is a fact, no physical laws that we know of will explain this. How can we explain it by chemical and physical knowledge? How much of oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, how many molecules is different position, and how many cells, etc., can explain this mysterious personality? And we still see it is a fact, and not only that, it is a real man, and it is the man that lives and moves and walks. It is that man that influences, moves his fellow beings, and passes out, and his intellect and books and works are but traces left behind. Think of this. Compare the great teachers of religion with the great philosophers. The philosophers scarcely influence anybody's inner man, and yet they wrote most marvelous books. The religious teacher, on the other hand, moved countries in their lifetime. The difference was made by personality. In the philosopher, it is a faint personality that influences. In the great prophet, it is a tremendous. In the former, we touch the intellect. In the later, we touch life. In the one case, it is simply a chemical process, putting certain chemical ingredients together, which may gradually combine and, under proper circumstances, bring out a flash of light or may fail. In the others, it is like a torch that goes round quickly, lightening others. The science of yoga claims that it has discovered the laws which develop this personality, and by proper attention to those laws and methods, each one can grow and strengthen his personality. This is one of the great practical things, and this is the secret of all education. This has a universal application in the life of householders, in the life of poor, the rich, the man of business, the spiritual man, in everyone's life. It is a great thing. The strengthening of this personality. There are laws, very fine, which are behind the physical laws, as we know. That is to say, there are no such realities as a physical world, a mental world, a spiritual world. Whatever is one. Let us say it is a sort of tapering existence. The thickest part of is here. It tapers and becomes finer and finer. The finest is what we call spirit, the grossest the body, and just as it is here in micros, 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 it is exactly the same in the micros and macros. The universe of ours The universe of ours is exactly like that. It is gross external thickness and is tapered into something finer and finer until it becomes God. We also know that the greatest power is logged in the fine, not the coarse. We see a man take up a huge weight. We see his muscles swell and all over his body. We see signs of exerted, and we think the muscles are powerful things, but it is the thin thread like things, the nerves which brings power to the muscle. The moment one of these thread is cut off from reaching the muscles, they are not able to work at all. These tiny nerves brings the power from something still finer, and that again in its turn brings it from something finer still, thought, and so on. So it is the fine that is really the seat of power. Of course, we can see the movement of the in the gross, but when the fine movement takes place, we cannot see them. When a gross thing moves, we catch it, and thus we naturally identify movements with things which are gross. But all the power is really in the fine. We do not see any movement in the fine, perhaps because the movement is so intense that we cannot perceive it. But if by any science, any investigation, we are helped to get hold of these finer forces, which are the cause of expressions, the expression itself will be under control. There is a little bubble coming from the bottom of the lake. We do not see it coming all the time. We see it only when it bursts on the surface. So, we can perceive thoughts only after they develop a great deal or after they become actions. We continuously complain that we have no control over our actions, over our thoughts. But how can we have it? If we can get control over the fine movements, if we can get hold of thoughts at the root, before it has become thought, before it has become action, then it would be possible for us to control the whole. Now, if there is a method by which we can analyze, investigate, understand, and finally grapple with those finer powers, the finer causes, then alone it is possible to have control over ourselves. And the man who has control over his own mind assuredly will have control over every other mind. That is why purity and morality have been always the object of religion. A pure, a moral man has control of himself, and all minds are the same. Different parts of one mind. He who knows one lump of clay has known all the clay in the universe. He who knows and controls his own mind knows the secret of every mind and has power over every mind. Now, a good deal of our physical evil we can get rid of if we have control over the parts, over the fine parts. A good A good many worries we can throw off if we have control over the fine movements. A good many failures can be averted if we have control over these fine powers. So far is utility. Yet beyond there is something higher. Now I shall tell you a theory which will not argue now, but simply place before you the consciousness or conclusion. Each man in his childhood runs through the stages through which his race has come up. Only the race took thousands of years to do it. While the child takes few years, the child is the old savage man, and he crushes a butterfly under his feet. The child is at first like the primitive ancestors of his own race. As he grows, he passes through the different stages until he reaches the development of his race. Only he does it swiftly and quickly. Now take the whole of the humanity as a race, and or take the whole of the animal creation, men and lower animals as one whole. There is an end towards which the whole is moving. Let us call it perfection. Some of men and women are born who anticipate the whole progress of mankind instead of waiting and being reborn over and over again for ages until the whole human race has attained to that perfection. They, as it were, rush through them in a few short years of their life. And we know that we can hasten these processes if we be true to ourselves. If the number of men without any culture be left to live upon an island and are given barely enough food, clothing, and shelter, they will gradually go on, and food, clothing, and shelter, they will gradually go on, evolving higher and higher stages of civilization. We know also that this growth can be hastened by additional means. We had the growth of trees, do we not? Left to nature, they would have grown only they would have been a longer times. We help them to grow in the shorter time than they would otherwise have taken. We are going, we are doing all the time the same thing, hastening the growth of things by artificial means. Why cannot we hasten the growth of the man? We can do that as a race. Why are teachers sent to other countries? Because by this means we can hasten the growth of races. Now can we not hasten the growth of individual? We can. Can we put a limit to the hasting? We cannot say how many or how much a man can grow in his one life. Now you have no idea to say that this much a man can do and no more. Circumstances can hasten him wonderfully. Can there be any limit then? Still you come to perfection. So what comes of it? That is a perfect man, that is to say, the type that is to come of this race. Perhaps millions of years hence, that man can come to today. And that is what the yogis say, that all the great incarnations of prophets are such men that they reached perfection in this one life. We have had such men at all periods of world history and at all times. Quite recently, there was such a man who lived the life of whole human race and reached the end. Even in this life, even this hastening of growth and growth must be under laws. Suppose we can investigate these laws and understand their secret and apply them to our own needs. It follows that we grow. We hasten our growth, we hasten our development, we become perfect, and even in this life. This is the higher part of our life, and the science of the study of mind and its powers has this perfection, has its real end. Helping others with money and other material things and teaching them how to go on smoothly in their daily life are merely details. The ultimate of this science is to bring out the perfect man and not let him wait for ages. Just a plaything in the hands of the physical world, like a log of driftwood carried from waves to waves and tossing about in the ocean. This science wants you to be strong, to take the work in your own hand instead of leaving it in the hands of nature and get beyond this little life. That is the great deal. Man is growing in knowledge, in power, in happiness. Continuously, we are growing as a race. We see that it is true, perfectly true. It is true of individual. To a certain extent, yes, but yet again, the question, where do you fix the limit? I can see only at a distance of so many feet, but I have seen a man close his eyes and see what it happens in another room. If you say you do not believe it, perhaps in 3 weeks that man can make you do the same. It can be taught to anybody. Some person in 5 minutes even can be made to read what is happening in another man's mind. This fact can be demonstrated. Now, if these things are true, where can we put a limit? If a man can read what is happening in another minds in the corner of this room, why cannot in the next room? Why not anywhere else? We cannot say why not. Dare not say that it is not possible. We can only say we do not know how it happens. Material scientists have no right to say that things like this are not possible. They can only say we do not know. Science has to collect facts, generalize upon them, deduce principles, and state the truth. That is all. But if we begin to deny the fact, how can a science be? There is no idea to the power of a man can obtain. This is a peculiarity of an Indian mind, and that when anything interests it, it gets absorbed in it, and other things are neglected. You know how many sciences had their origin in India. Mathematics began there. You are even today counting 1, 2, 3, etc. to 0 after Sanskrit figures, and you all know that algebra also originated in India, and that gravitation was known to the Indian thousands of years before Newton was born. You see the peculiarity at a certain period of Indian history, this one subject of man and his mind absorbed all their interest, and it was so enticing because it seemed the easiest way to achieve their end. Now the Indian mind became so thoroughly persuaded that mind could do anything and everything according to law, and that its power became the great object of study. Charms, magic, and other powers, and all that were nothing extraordinary, but a regularly taught science, just as physical sciences they had thought before that. Such a conviction in these things can came upon the race that physical sciences nearly died out. It was the one thing that came before them. Different sect of yogis began to make all sort of experiments. Some made experiments with light, trying to find out how light of different colors produce changes in the body. They wore a certain colored cloth, lived under a certain color, and ate certain colored foods. All sort of experiments were made in this way. Other made experiments in sound by stopping and non-stopping their ears. And still others experimented in the sense of smell, and so on. The whole idea was to get at the basis to reach the fine part of the thing. And some of them really showed most marvelous power. Many of them were trying to float in the air or pass through it. I shall tell you a story which I heard from a great scholar in the West. It was told him by a governor of Ceylon who saw the performance. A girl was brought forward and seated cross-legged upon a stool made of stick across. After she had been seated for a time, the showman began to take out, one after other, these crossbars, and when all were taken off, the girl was left floating in the air. The governor thought there was some trick, so he drew his sword and violently passed it under the girl. Nothing was there. Now, what was this? It was not magic, something extraordinary. That is the peculiarity. No one in India would tell you that the things like this do not exist. To the Hindu, it is a matter of course. You know what the Hindus would often say when they have to fight their enemies. Oh, one of our yogis will come and drive the whole lot out. It is extreme belief of the race. What power is there in the hands or the swords? The power is all in the spirit. If this is true, it is temptation enough for the mind to exert its highest. But as with every other science, it is very difficult to make any great achievement. So also with this, nay much more. At most people think that these powers can be easily gained. How many are the years you take to make a fortune? Think of that. First, how many years do you take to learn electrical science or engineering? And then you have to work all the rest of your life. Again, most of the other sciences deals with things that do not move, that are fixed. You can analyze the chair does not fly from you, but this science deals with the mind, which moves all the time. The moment you want to study it, it slips. Now the mind is in one mood. The next moment, perhaps, it is different, or changing all the time. In the midst of all these changes, it has to be studied and understand, grasped, and controlled. How much more difficult then is this science? It requires rigorous training. People ask me why I do not give them practical lessons. Why it is no joke. I stand upon this platform talking to you and you go home and find no benefit, nor do I. Then you say it is all bush. It is because you want to make a bush of it. I know very little of this science, but the little that I gained, I worked for 30 years of my life, and for 6 years I have been telling people that the little that I know. It took me 30 years to learn it, 30 years of hard struggle. Sometime I worked at it 20 hours during the 24 during the 24 hours. Sometimes I slept only 1 hour in the night. Sometimes I worked whole nights. Sometimes I lived in places where there was hardly a sound, hardly a breath. Sometimes I had to live in caves. Think of that, and yet I know little or nothing. I have barely touched the hem of the garment of this science, but I can understand that it is true and vast and wonderful. Now, if there is any one among us you who really want to study this science, he will have to start with that sort of determination, the same as, nay, even more than that which he puts into his any business of life. And what an amount of attention does business requires, and what rigorous taskmaster it is. Even if the father, the mother, the wife, the children dies, business cannot stop. Even if the heart is breaking, we still have to go to our places of business whenever hours of the work it's a pang. That is business, and we think that it is just that is right. This science calls for more applications than any business can ever require. Many men can succeed in business, very few of the in this, because so much depends upon the particular constitution of a person studying it. As in businesses, all may not make a fortune, but everyone can make something. So, in the study of this science, each one can get a glimpse which will convince him to of his truth and of the fact that there have been men who realized it fully. This is the outline of the science. It stands upon this its own outfit, and it is the own light and challenges comprising with their any other science. There have been charlatans, there have been magicians, there have been cheats, and more than in any other field. Why? For the same reason that more profitable the business, the greater the number of charlatans and cheats. But that is the one reason why the business should not be good. And one thing why the business should not be good. And one thing more, it may be good intellectual gymnastics. And one thing more, it may be good intellectual gymnastic to listen to all the arguments and intellectual satisfaction to hear of wonderful things. But if any one of you really wants to learn something beyond that, merely attending lecture will not do. That cannot be taught in lecture, for it is life, and life can only convey it. If there are any among us you who are really determined to learn, I shall be very glad. I shall be very glad to help them.